Hello everyone. I got a lot of requests for starting kind of a stitch study for left-handed people. Well, also right-handed, but I'm left-handed, so it's going to be more accurate for left-handed. Of a study of a slow stitching and practice different stitches. So this is a sample that I show to everyone that attends my slow stitching club. And I thought it would be nice to study each stitch one by one and practice different maybe stitch it by at the different angles, or different length of the stitches, different distances between the stitches. And I recently noticed that my stitches are quite regular. So this is my pile that I do now during my 100-day project. I'm so behind. I try to do it every day. I don't always manage, but it's kind of a like stitch study in a way, but I thought it would be nice to maybe have a small piece of padding or any other fabric and just kind of maybe make it into a book afterwards. So I just want to go quickly through the pieces that I made. I just want to show you. But mostly my favorite stitch is just like a regular straight stitch, and I like to play around with it. Like here I made like different shapes and was turning it around and stuff. So I have written the numbers on the back so I can keep track on which one is which, and I'm planning to make a plaid out of it afterwards. So I'm going to end up with the 100. I already have bigger pieces as well that I did in the past, just as a practice, and I thought it would be nice to incorporate them. My mum was recently visiting for asked for a short break, and I taught her how to slow stitch. She fell in love with it as well, and she will do a few pieces for my bed cover afterwards as well. So it would be nice to have a few pieces of her in my plaid as well. So as you can see, they're not very well, they're very quick to make. Some of them are covered completely with stitches. Sometimes I leave the full like half of the piece that it's not stitched. Like I'm going to connect them, so this piece is going to be attached to padding that I have here. This is the one that my mom made. That was her first one. This is her second one. And I have those two as well. So yeah, I thought it would be nice to just practice stitches, and I prepared small pieces of padding, and for the padding I use a fleece. I like it that it's fluffy and it's very thin. Normally at the beginning I was using fleece because I like the fluffy fabric, but I didn't like the thickness of it, so it was very difficult for my wrist to go through the stitches and to have more and more stitches on like in one row. And this is something that we did during our slow stitching club, like a pop-up club. So this is just an easy piece that I turned into a needle book. All the fabrics that you see here are dyed by hand, and I dyed them last year, and I was always I was hoarding them. didn't want to use them because they were so pretty, but I decided that it's time for them to go, because otherwise I just look at them and I don't use them, and they should be used. They're so pretty. So the thread that I'm going to use is a crochet cotton. I like the thinner thinner thread. If you like the embroidery floss, it's also fine. If you like the thick, then you can leave 6 strand. If you like it thinner, then you can divide it into 2 threads or 2 times 3. And today I'm going to use this needle. It's an embroidery needle, but normally what I use is this giant doll needle, and I hold it like like this, and it helps me to make a lot of stitches in one go, so I can make even 10 stitches in one go on that needle. But I will show you a little bit more conventional a way to do slow stitching with a smaller needle. Okay, so just to give you a reference, so this kind of 2 hands, or I have quite a small hand, so it will be like a little bit bigger than maybe 1.5 hand. And I have quite a few squares, and I'm not sure if I'm going to connect them maybe with the Japanese banding here. So that will be like a booklet that I can always go back to the stitches, or I'm going to use this square in my plaid as well. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with that yet. But and this is my box with dyed fabrics. I'm sorry for the wobble. So this is I have another one, but I just brought one with me today. So I will use a little bit darker fabric today, so you can see. So what I always recommend is to have your piece 0.5 centimeter, around 2-3 millimeters larger than padding, because once you start stitching, the fabric starts pulling on the fabric, and it gives this kind of a quilt effect, which is really nice, but it shrinks the fabric. So if you want your fabric to be to cover the whole padding, then it should be a little bit larger. This should be enough. Also, when you decide that you want your pieces to overlap each other, it is good to I will show you here. It is good to overlap them as well. So let's say if you do it like this, I'm not sure if you can see. So if they're going to overlap just a tiny bit, maybe like this would be easier, they're going to probably fall apart, and then you will be able to see the padding. So what I normally do, I also overlap them at least 0.5 centimeter, so that I make sure that if the stitches pull them outside or apart, they will always stay together. What I also sometimes like to make, just throw random pieces together and just patch the holes with the smaller pieces of fabric. So that's something that you can do as well. And the length of the thread. This is a very common question. So I take one piece of, well, thread, and I go all the way to my shoulder, so it's like a whole arm length, and then so this was where it reached my shoulder, and then I turn it around and I cut it around here, so it's just add a little bit extra. So when you thread your needle, you want your needle to go more or less like this. So you just sew with one strand, and you make a knot here. So you can make a quilter's knot. So let me just put this around so you can see better. Or you can make a double knot. So the quilter's knot is, and this is for left-handed. So if you're right-handed, it would just be the other way around. So you grab your needle and put the thread against the needle, and then you hold it with the index finger, and then you wrap it around a few times. I like to do it 4 or 5 times, it doesn't matter. Then I grab with my right hand the needle that is wrapped, the thread that is wrapped around the needle, and I just pull it through the whole length of the thread, and I just pull through that little tail, and that gives me a nice knot. So this is the very easy way. It doesn't work when you're learning. It does take a couple of times to get a hang of it, but you can also just make a simple knot to make sure that it's big enough. So I think today we can start with the straight stitch, because this is like the basic stitch that I like to, let's just cup of tea. Just a basic stitch, and also the most common stitch that I use the most. So so if you want, you can pin your fabric, and you can, my recommendation is to always pin them the same direction, because otherwise if they go, one goes like this, one goes like this, no matter how you're going to hold it, you might poke your hand or your fingers with a needle. So I'm going to go that way. That means I'll put my pins that way, because I'm going to hold my fabric this way. So I don't want to poke my hand, and I just do 2 needles, that's enough. So if I'm going to hold my piece like this, the pins go along the fold, so I'm not going to poke myself. And what you want to do is you want to start in the back. So I just put a piece in the back, and I normally start around, again, 1/2 centimeter from the edge, because for whatever I do, I normally don't either stitch it around it and catch those edges, or I'm not sure if it's just for relaxing, or I don't know what I'm going to use it, and I can always add more stitches. So the straight stitch is very straightforward. Basically, you put the needle from below, so the knot is on the wrong side, and then what you do is you go up or down and up, down and up, and down and up. And then once you feel like this is enough, you can also do it just 1 stitch at a time, but I like to do a little bit more. And then you pull a thread, and this is something now to pay attention to. If you pull it too hard, your fabric is going to wrinkle like this. So what I normally do, I just stretch the fabric to make sure that it doesn't wrinkle, and then again I go down and up and down, up, down, up, down, up, pull it through until the end and stretch the fabric. So down, up, down, up, down, up, and I'm at the end of the row. So just pull through, stretch, and then either you want to have your turning stitch like this, then you would go here, but I like to keep my rows open. Then I go down and up just right underneath that row, so then my needle is in the next row again. So I'm going to do a couple of rows, just random rows, and afterwards I'm going to show you a couple of variations. So I will speed this up a little bit, and I will meet you at the end of the row 3. So I'm at the end of the row 3. So as you can see, these are just random stitches. I didn't really pay attention. I can take the needles now as well, pins I mean. I didn't really pay attention how I was stitching, and normally this is what I like to do the best. And slow stitching is also about just letting go and just yeah, just let the process flow, because the stitching is more important than the result most of the time, so unless you have a project in mind. So I just went to another row and I made a little bit of a bigger gap, so I'm going to work in the rows of 3. So the next stitch that I would like to do, I would like to have like rows of stitches that have the same length and the same break, and then again stitch, 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 break, stitch, 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 break, because here was a little bit random, they're not completely aligned, but this time I would like to pay more attention. So the first row is again just first row that it's going to guide the rest of the rows. So let me just finish that quickly, and remember to stretch. So I most of the time like bigger stitches. I know that some people like very, very tiny stitches, and that's fine. So it just these are a little bit bigger because normally I do it on my lap, so get a little bit closer, but this is fine as well. So the next row of stitches, I want to be exactly in the same line. So there will be here, 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 and here. So let's go. So you want to pay attention when this stitch went down and when it went up, and of course if it's not exactly to the millimeter, it's okay, like it's not the end of the world, but I just want to show you how nice they look when they aligned as well. You can also make the gaps between the stitches either very small or large. The stitches can be very large and long as well. So I call it slow stitching freestyle embroidery because there is no rules here. Everything that you do is good. So we already have 2 rows. So I'm just going to finish that one and just get out here. So we have a small gap. And just going to do exactly the same thing the other way around. So I'm going to go where the previous stitch ended. And just kind of follow the previous row. Okay, I'll meet you at the end. Okay, so I'm at the end. I think maybe I will make one more so then it's more pronounced. And then we can do another row and another steady of the same stitch. So this is all the same stitch, it's all straight stitch. Okay. Yeah, so I'll just finish that in a second. So you can see that if you continue, then you have a row of lines that are going that way. What happens if we're going to do stitches that way and just do a small rows of 2? So let's try that. So I'm going to make another row here, and instead of going that way, I'm going to go that way, but just in a row of 2. So 1 stitch out and second stitch, and I'm going to start a new row next to it. So because I'm doing only 2 stitches, I'm turning around after 1 stitch, so it's going to be a little bit more fiddly and a little bit more time consuming, but maybe we can just do half a row and then we can see. And like most ladies that I work with, they really want to have like straight stitch, like as straight as possible, whereas I like as wonky as possible. So I guess it depends on your style. Sometimes I really want to have it wonky, but it just goes too straight because the length of the needle doesn't allow me to make it wonky. So I try to make it wonky on purpose, but it doesn't really always work out. So hopefully this is helpful for you. If you have any questions, you can let me know. I will also leave the link to my Instagram, so you can see all the squares that I did for 100 days project. and also you can see other work of the ladies from the Slow Stitching Club. And if you would like to join, you're more than welcome. We have a Zoom meetings every first Tuesday of the month. So it'd be nice to have you. And then every second month we have a pop-up where we do a project. So in December we did ornaments, in January we did this needlebook, and in April we're going to make a drawstring bag. So it's nice to oh yeah, how to finish. So you make a knot, so you go underneath the padding, needle through, and then needle through the loop. And there I do it a couple of times, and then to make sure that knot is secure, I just go plain straight stitch. And sometimes I go just right through the padding, just walk, just travel with the needle underneath the padding, but between the padding and the fabric, and then I just cut the excess. Okay, so let me just thread the needle again. So this is what we have so far, and you can see that this is exactly the same thing, only the stitches are the other way around. So I will, this was random, and now I will try to make it in a group of 3. So I will just continue the row, and you can see how this is going to look. I think making a book with a stitch study is nice to keep a reference and also inspiration. So just leave a little bit of a gap. Whenever you want to do a project and you don't know what kind of stitch you want to make, or you get sick of making the same stitches over and over, and you want to make something different. So I just make a tiny gap, and then I go in. So the stitches are very close to each other. So this is row number 2, and again tiny gap, and then this would be row 3. So go small knot. So now the gap is going to be a little bit bigger than before. And again I do 2 stitches, and this time I make again a tiny gap. You can also do gaps even smaller. So if you want your stitches to nearly touch each other, that's also fine. So again, a tiny gap. And this is the row 3, and we do again a little bit of a bigger gap now. Tiny gap. Oh, I keep having knots. So stitches close together. And then again, this is a number 3 from that series. Oh yeah. So if you have something like this, you just pull the threads to make them open again. Sometimes that happens when you make a knot. Okay, so this is 3rd stitch in that group, and then make a bigger gap again. Oh, come on. And one more. Okay. That should be fine. So again, 2 stitches, and this is number 1 of that group. So again, it's tiny gap. I always, but see, it's already like a little bump here. So always remember to stretch the fabric, otherwise the gap is going to get smaller and smaller, and it's going to pull your fabric. So I don't know if you can, I'll make one more row. So you can see. So I'm at the bottom. So bigger gap. And again, try to track the same length of the stitches. It's okay if they're not ideal. The slow stitching is more about, again, about the process rather than perfection. And also, if you're not happy about your stitch, it's not allowed to pick stitches or undo stitches in a slow stitching club. This is the only rule we have, because after you finish, you're not going to see that stitch that you don't like. It's just going to disappear. I think I just finished the row, so then we can maybe a little bit bigger. It's the same when you have a stain on a very busy fabric. After you're the only one who can see it, no one else can. So that was just a bit too big of a gap. Oops, keep getting this knot. So this would be very close to compensate for the big gap in the middle. And you can see my stitches are far from perfect, and that's what I like. Imperfection is perfect in a slow stitching. Okay, so this would be the last group. Tiny gap. It was just a bit too big. So tiny, very close and very close. I stretch the fabric, and I have a double thread here, and just pull. Okay, So we have 3 different variation of the same, or 4 actually. So we have one that it's very random, one that it's in groups in the rows, one that it's again random but it's the other way around, and one that it's in tiny groups. So if you continue doing this, here you will end up with kind of small rows of stitches. You can also make the gaps between those groups a little bit bigger, so then this is more pronounced. So let's make another row that it's going to be this way, but let's make it like a brick. So my needles and my thread is finished here, and I will just travel in between the fabrics to get to the point that I want to be. So the fabric is tacked in between the fabrics. Again, stretch it. So I will make the first row, again it's random, because this is the row that it's going to set the trend, let's say, or the pattern. Pull through and stretch. Okay, this will be the last one. And the next row I'm going to start halfway through that stitch. So my needle is going to come out here. So I'll go underneath and mark halfway through that stitch. And then I want to go halfway through the gap. And then halfway through the stitch, halfway through the gap, halfway through the stitch, halfway through the gap, halfway through the stitch. So you see the stitches are moving. So there we have 2 options. Either we continue going that way, or we start moving that way, like bricks in a building. I think I will continue moving the stitches to the right, so they will continue go that way. Just pull the needle, thread. So, and up here. So I just finished the row, and then I want to now match again with the previous row. Yes, or let me have a look. Yeah. So between half stitch in the middle of the stitch, and then in the middle of the gap, in the middle of the stitch, in the middle of the gap, in the middle of the stitch, in the middle of the gap, and so on. So this is a brick effect. What I sometimes do to have a clearer picture of how I want my stitches to look is that I draw it simply on a piece of paper with a pen, because stitching is like drawing with a thread and needle, right? So So now either you go with the previous row if you want to continue, or you kind of go halfway through the stitch and halfway through the gap. I like to follow the row that was one before, so not directly this one but that one, so then my stitches have more or less the same length. So that will be the last one, and I will show you another one, another variation of a stray stitch that it's again a little bit random, not in a line. So I will just quickly show you how this one looks. So this is the brick one. So if you're going to continue, then they are going to go a little bit that way. So now what I want to make is 2 lines like this, and 2 lines here, 2 lines there, 2 lines this. So make small arrows. So very close. So we have a group of 2. Like this. And now we go that way. And again we go the other way. This way. So put here. And we go the other way. That way. So I just kind of do it randomly and don't really follow anything here. So these are quite close to each other, but what will happen if we're going to make bigger gaps? So I still kind of make it in a row to make the most out of my fabric, but if you do these, they can be placed on the fabric in a random way. I'll go that way now. So that they can be very close to each other, and the gaps can be a little bit bigger. So if I went that way, I will go that way now. And Easter is coming soon. So if you want to stitch an Easter egg, we can make an Easter pattern. I was always making this pattern on my Easter eggs when I was painting my eggs. So whenever you make kind of like a zigzag, you don't want to go back to the same hole, so you want to kind of think ahead where your next stitch is going to be. So if I go back, then my next stitch is going to be here. So I pull a little bit further. And the previous stitch. So I start making shape. So it is drawing with the thread. So my triangles are getting a little bit bigger, so I can make them also smaller. So just put closer to this stitch. And again to the stitch that I'm going to connect it, so the triangles are going to be tiny bit smaller. Okay, we're nearly done with this piece of fabric. Let me just, my thread is also nearly finished, so that's good. So one more line. Just finish the thread, and we have one space for one more row, and you can see in the back it's stitches in lines. Okay, so let me just thread my needle again. So this is what we have so far. I think we can make at least 2 more pieces of fabric with the stitch. Okay. So what I wanted to do now is to go again at the angles. But one row, so at the angle, and then next stitch is close. So depends how close your stitches you want it to be. That's the gap between the stitches should be. So I want to make the row this way, and then the other row the other way around. So this is what you can do. Oh yeah. No, I think I know how to make wonky stitches from now on. Just keep the fabric far away from my laps. So I normally, when I stitch, I sit with my legs crossed on the sofa. Not the best for the neck and for the back, but this is the most comfortable position for myself. So again, if you have any questions or you would like to have more different patterns with the straight stitch, just let me know and we can make a second page in our little book. I think the next time we're going to make either blanket stitch or different patterns, a little bit like we did here. So connected stitches, maybe a fly stitch, or just play with the blanket stitch. Blanket stitch is always spectacular for everyone and it looks very pretty. So just to give you a reference, this is the blanket stitch. You can make it in a straight line or in a circle or in a funny way, funny line. I would love to see your pages. So if you make any, just put a hashtag Slow Stitching Club, or you can tag me Creative Mama Tribes, and I would love to see your creations. Okay, so we got to the end, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go the other way. So I'm going to place my stitch close and then go that way. So I'm going to try to match with the stitches that are in the previous row, but not really connect them. So there's going to be a tiny gap. And my padding is finished here, that's why the stitches look a bit wonky. Also, if you have any questions towards the fabrics or needles or threads that I use, please let me know. I think I have so much fabric that I think I'm going to put a few kits with my natural dye fabrics on sale as well. So what is in a kit, you will get padding, a piece of padding, and around 20 pieces of fabrics, or well, definitely much more than the size of the padding, so you can make maybe 2 or 3, or you can make a funny collage or whatever you like. You also get the embroidery thread, a needle, and a set of pins. So with that kit, you'll be able to start. I always recommend to have a look around in your home, because probably you have maybe a old pillowcase that you don't like anymore, or old tablecloth. Maybe your neighbors or your family has a piece that they don't like, and that could be a perfect starter. For the padding, again, I'm using fleece, so if you have any old fleece shirt or sheet from your bed, it can be also blanket, a thin blanket. So there's no need to buy anything, but if you want, you can contact me, and I will put them shortly in my Etsy shop. I'll put the link down below as well, but if you want one before I put one, or you have any specific colors that you would like to have, you can just text me and I will put one for you. Okay, So this one is nearly done. I'm making the stitches smaller because I want to fit in the padding, and I will just finish that thread, and then we can have a final look on our first page of our study book. Let me just finish. So here's our, it looks a little bit like a Christmas tree. So here's our piece. So we did a random straight stitch, a stitch in groups, in lines, groups that way, brick pattern, and if you would continue, go from the middle of that stitch and continue that way, you would have like a flow line. We did random groups of 2. I call it Easter egg decoration. And kind of like a pine tree branch. Okay, so I think this is it. If you have any questions again, or would you like to order a kit, or you would like to have more information about the Slow Stitching Club, or you would have any suggestions about the stitches or anything, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed it. My goal is to release 1 video a week, so we have a nice book very soon. Yeah, if you have any questions, just let me know, and if not, then I will see you next week. Bye bye.